Welcome, everyone. So today we are going to do something really fundamental. We're going to take what is likely the very first Chinese conversation you'll ever have, and we're going to deconstruct it. We'll uncover all the linguistic, cultural, and even the historical layers that are hidden in just a few simple-sounding words. This stuff is absolutely foundational, so let's really dive in.
So here's our plan for today's session. First, we'll look at the conversation itself. Then we're going to break down each part piece by piece. We'll start with the greeting, then the introduction. After that, and this is so important, we'll step back and look at the cultural context, what I like to call the cultural handshake. And then finally, we'll put it all back together into a conversation that you can have with confidence.
Okay, this right here is our target. Just two simple lines. Now, by the end of our time together, you're not just going to know what these sentences mean, you're going to understand why they're built this way, how to pronounce them perfectly, and maybe most importantly, when to use each version. So, let's get started. We're going to begin with, the most universal of greetings, ni hao. Now, it seems so simple, right? But believe me, these two characters are packed with meaning, and they contain a really critical pronunciation rule that trips up almost every single beginner. First up, we have ni, pronounced ni. This is your informal singular you. Now, take a look at the component on the left. Iren, see that? That's what we call the person radical. And you are going to see this little guy in a ton of characters that have to do with people. The tone here is the third tone. It's a falling and then rising sound. Ni. Why don't you try that with me? Ni. The second character is hao, pronounced hao, which means good or well or fine. So when you put them together, ni hao literally translates to you good. It's just a simple, elegant way to wish someone well. It also has that same falling, rising third tone, hao. But you know the story behind how this character was formed? Well, that's where it gets really fascinating. Let's take a closer look here. The character hao is actually a combination of two other characters. On the left side, you have nu, which means woman, and on the right, you have zi, which means child. So the ancient creators of the Chinese language decided that putting a woman and a child together represented the very concept of good. It's just a beautiful illustration of a deep-seated cultural value, giving us a little glimpse into a worldview that's embedded right into the writing system itself. Now here is the absolutely crucial point. We have two third tones right next to each other, ni and hao. In natural spoken Mandarin, this basically never happens. There's a rule called tone sondi that comes into play. The first third tone actually changes into a second tone, which is a rising tone. A super common mistake beginners make is pronouncing it with two deep dips, ni, hao. It sounds clunky, it sounds unnatural. The correct flow is a rising tone followed by the dipping tone, ni hao. Listen one more time, ni hao. I'm not kidding, this is probably the single most important pronunciation rule you need to master right at the beginning. Excellent. Okay, now that we can greet someone properly, let's move on to the next part of our conversation, how to introduce ourselves. And this involves a subtle but really important grammatical choice. First things first, we need our subject. That's 我, pronounce 我. This is the pronoun for I or me. And would you look at that, it's a third tone again, 我. So our sentence is always going to start with I, and then it's followed by a verb. And that brings us to a really key question that often throws new learners for a loop. Do you say I am called, or do you say I am? Well, both ways exist in Chinese, but they are definitely not interchangeable. Your choice between the verbs 叫 and 是 depends entirely on what kind of name you're about to give. This table here breaks it down really clearly. Okay, so 叫 literally means to call or to be called. You're going to use this one primarily for your given name. For instance, 我叫 David. I am called David. Now, on the other hand, we have 是. This is the verb to be, like am, is, or are. You use this when you're stating your full name or a title or your identity. So, 我是 David Smith, or you could say 我是老师, I am a teacher. Using 叫 with your full name is a classic beginner mistake. Getting this distinction right is key to sounding natural. So far, we've really been focused on the linguistics, but language is just a vehicle for culture, right? Simply knowing the words is never enough. To truly connect with someone, we have to understand the etiquette, the nonverbal cues, what I call the cultural handshake that goes along with the verbal one. Now, listen, this is incredibly important for anyone who plans to live or work in a Chinese-speaking environment. Formality matters a lot. Hierarchy and showing respect are just paramount. For example, if you're speaking to a professor, an elder, or your boss, you would never use ni. Instead, you absolutely must use the formal you, nin. If you look at the character, you'll see it has the heart radical sin at the bottom, which implies you're speaking with respect from the heart. So a greeting would instantly become nin hao. Also, a slight nod of the head is a very common and respectful gesture during introductions. Forgetting these little things can easily be perceived as rude, so understanding them is absolutely crucial. All right, we have deconstructed the grammar, we've worked on perfecting the pronunciation, and we've absorbed the cultural context. Now, let's put it all together and see how this conversation actually flows in practice. So here's the basic flow. It's a simple 4-step process. You greet them, you state your name using the correct verb for the situation, you listen carefully to their introduction, and then you acknowledge them with a nod. Okay, now let's perform it. I'll just play both parts so you can hear it. Imagine I'm student A, I approach with a slight nod, and I say, "Ni hao, 我叫 David." You hear that rising tone on ni? Now, as student B, I respond with a nod back. "Ni hao, 我是 Maria Chen." See how that works? It's simple, it's respectful, and it's linguistically correct. That flow is everything. So as we've seen, even the simplest greeting, ni hao, isn't just 2 words. It's a lesson in phonetics, it's a window into ancient values, and it's a guide to social etiquette. It really forces us to ask what other profound stories and cultural blueprints are hidden in the words that we might otherwise just take for granted. And that right there is the true beauty of learning a new language.